To understand Shakespeare's language, you have to do what he wanted you to do with it. You have to speak it. Trying to understand Shakespeare's language by looking at a book is a bit like trying to understand a Picasso painting with a blindfold on, or trying to learn about a symphony by watching it on TV with the sound turned down. Shakespeare's language is there to be spoken. Have you ever seen Shakespeare's original copy of his plays? No, nobody has. The plays were all got together by his acting friends afterwards and put together in an acting edition. And that's the only way you'll truly understand it, is by getting it in your mouth and speaking it. So, let's start with what we can hear. Let's start with the rhythm of language. If you've heard of iambic pentameter and are bored with it already, try speaking it. You speak it all the time. Do you think England stand a chance tonight? Only if Rooney, Terry, Lampard play. But if the ref won't play it by the rules, I don't see how we'll make it to round 2. It's not very interesting, but it's iambic pentameter. Do you think England stand a chance tonight? Only if Rooney, Terry, Lampard play. But if the ref won't play it by the rules, I don't see how we'll make it to round 2. That's the magic of iambic pentameter. It's how we speak anyway. But for Shakespeare, therefore, that's not so special. That's his default way of writing poetry. When everything's okay and everything's fine, he'll speak it, his characters will speak in iambic pentameter. Take Romeo when he's at his most excited. But soft, what light from yonder window breaks? It is the east, and Juliet is the sun. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she. Nice, regular, iambic pentameter. But did you notice, even in that short speech, he can take the meaning on from the end of one line where he misses out the punctuation so that it hits the word he really wants you to hear on the next line. Listen again. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, who is already sick and pale with grief that thou, her maid, art far more fair than she. That's the word he wants you to listen to, that thou, Juliet. But Shakespeare's cleverer than that. Look at Shakespeare's most famous line. To be or not to be, that is the question. There's an extra syllable. Now Hamlet's suicidal, and I can tell you it's not because he's got his iambic pentameters in a twist. He's suicidal, therefore even what he's thinking is irregular, doesn't quite work. Shakespeare can do amazing things with the rhythm of words, which you can only discover if you try it for yourself. Look at Macbeth, realizing at the end that life is fairly pointless, and this time, don't just listen to the rhythm, but listen to the sound of the words. I reckon this would sound fairly depressed and depressing, even if you didn't understand any English at all. Tomorrow, and tomorrow, and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day to the last syllable of recorded time. And all our yesterdays have lighted fools the way to dusty death. Out, out, brief candle. Life's but a walking shadow. A poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. It is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Did you notice in the middle of there that the only bit that seemed to keep to regular iambic pentameter was the bit where he's describing a really bad actor? Life's but a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. I don't think Shakespeare was that interested in iambic pentameter or impressed by it at all. So, remember what happens to Macbeth. A couple of scenes later, he ends up like that. What do you think of it so far? Rakesh? So, now we have our ears open to rhythm and pace, and it's starting to make sense of the sound of the language. She'll also be helping us to identify which are the really important words to sort out. Now, Shakespeare certainly had a huge vocabulary, and even in his own time, people thought he was fairly complicated. But if you have that many good words, you're going to want to use the best ones in the best places, aren't you? So, it's the words that create the character. It's the vocabulary, the way they speak, what they do with it. Let's look at a really minor character. Let's look at Aegeus from A Midsummer Night's Dream. He must be the grumpiest... Oh, I can't say. All right, sorry. He must be the most miserable person in any Shakespeare comedy. He's really nasty. He's not funny nasty, he's just nasty. After all, he wants his daughter to marry the person she doesn't love or die. It's hardly a bundle of laughs, is it? Let's look at what he says. This is within the first 10 seconds of his first speech, when he's first appeared. And already this pompous idiot is in full flow. Full of vexation come I with complaint against my child, my daughter Hermia. Stand forth, Demetrius. This noble lord hath my consent to marry her. Stand forth, Lysander. And my gracious duke, this man hath bewitched the bosom of my child. Thou, Lysander, thou hast given her rhymes and interchanged love tokens with my child. Can you hear this pompous fool? His very first line, full of vexation come I with complaint. That's not Shakespeare sounding old-fashioned. That's a really pompous way of putting things. And what does vexation sound like? Well, he's angry, isn't he? Wouldn't be the word you and I would use, but vexation sounds fairly fierce to me. And then look at how he builds up his argument. Stand forth, Demetrius. Stand forth, Lysander. He's making a big show of things. And one of the little details your teacher will be telling you is when Elizabethans use the word thou. You heard it referred to Juliet as thou, so you must use it when you love somebody. And you've just heard Aegeus going, thou, Lysander, thou hast bewitched the bosom of my child. That's all you need to know about the word thou. You could use it to people you loved and people you hated. Everybody in between was just you. So, what have we learned? To understand Shakespeare's language, you need to get up from your desk, pick up your book, and start speaking it. Tights and a frilly ruff are optional, but surprisingly comfortable. When you have played around with the rhythm, you'll have a pretty good idea of what is important to the speech and who your character is. There's lots more you can do. You can search for the images, you can find actions to put with certain lines, you can look at the imagery that he's used. But you can't do any of that staring at a book. Get up, speak the language,